Watch this.
On your Friday, it's 2:08, the week that was, and here we go. Testing has been a major topic through the coronavirus pandemic. We all know that. There's a good chance that a lot of you watching at home have taken a COVID test between now and back in March of 2020. Time flies, right? Well, the testing conversation, it seems to go in cycles. There will be times with really high demands, and there'll be times with almost no demand at all. It all depends on what the virus is doing in Idaho. Now, more recently, rapid at-home tests have become really popular. And why not? You get a quick result, and then you know what you need to do next based on that result. The trick these days is trying to find one of those at-home tests. But some good news this week. President Biden says he's ordering 1 billion at-home COVID tests for Americans with the idea of sending them to people in need at home for free all across the country. But how does that impact clinic and lab-based testing? Because, as we know, at-home rapid tests, they're not reported in the state data. And with the emphasis more on those tests now, will public health data suffer because everyone's just testing at home? Meaning, are public health officials concerned that they're going to lose out on all of this data and they're not going to be able to track the virus the same way they've been able to since early last year, simply because they're not going to have the data? Well, I spoke with experts from the state as well as a major testing outfit in our community for perspective on the home versus lab test debate. With the spread of the highly contagious Omicron COVID variant, getting tested for the virus is, again, a very popular activity. Just ask the people like the team at Crush the Curve.
Yes, we have been really busy. This week, we have been running a small community site at full capacity.
Maricela Rios is a testing site coordinator for Crush the Curve. Rios tells me people stop by for a COVID test for a variety of reasons, but they have found that a lack of rapid tests has certainly pushed people to getting a lab-based PCR test through places like Crush the Curve.
Yeah, there's been some frustration that's been expressed. Like, we're looking for a rapid. Do you know where we can get a rapid?
The plain truth is that rapid at-home tests are out of stock nationwide. The only option some have is getting an appointment at a clinic.
Testing is very busy. It seems throughout the course of the pandemic, what we've observed is every time there's a huge spike in positivity, there's a corresponding increase in demand for testing.
Dr. Christopher Ball is the chief of the Idaho Bureau of Laboratories. Unlike the store-bought rapid tests, Dr. Ball says Idaho is seeing availability for people looking to get tested in a clinic and have their samples sent to a lab.
They seem to say they've got adequate PCR capability. There may be some limitations for a lot of healthcare settings. I know that staffing has become an issue, so I think that may be what is limiting some of the appointment times. From what we're hearing, there still are appointments available for PCR testing if people are willing to wait.
The wait is for getting a test and for getting the test result. Combined, the wait can be a few days. That's why rapid at-home tests are so popular right now. Some good news this week in that vein. The Biden administration says they're ordering 1 billion rapid tests to send to Americans for free. It's important to note, though, that people who take rapid tests at home, they're not included in data metrics tracked by the state or the country. So, as people continue to shift away from PCR tests taken at places like clinics, public health experts miss out on valuable data.
I think it's a real balancing act that we're trying to, we definitely need to have, people getting PCR tests so that we can continue to describe the dynamics of the pandemic. But as we move towards more convenient at-home options, I think it's better for people in terms of convenience and being able to hopefully limit transmission.
Dr. Ball says the at-home rapid test can be really helpful, though, if people take them seriously.
I would be willing to sacrifice a little bit of the visibility we have on the pandemic if people are actually going to take a test and isolate themselves if they're positive. And take appropriate actions to limit transmission.
So, how does the state lab and public health experts adapt to people leaning more towards at-home testing?
We in public health love to have data so that we can communicate to the public the severity or the reality of what's happening. As we start seeing fewer and fewer people contributing to that test numbers that we can report on, it does become more challenging to interpret what the pandemic really looks like.
Dr. Ball tells me the state is considering other ways to track the virus, and we're going to talk about one of those in just a minute, wastewater testing. First, though, I mentioned free rapid at-home tests that the U.S. government is going to send out, and we actually just got details on how this is all going to work. So here's what we know. The White House says that the federal website where Americans can request their free COVID-19 test, it will begin accepting orders coming up on Wednesday. So we will remind you as we get closer to that. They want everyone to know that supplies will be limited to just 4 free tests per home. And the White House says that tests will typically begin shipping within 7 to 12 days of ordering through the United States Postal Service. So they're hoping to get them out in 1 to 3 days based on that time in their first class package service. So if you were looking to get one immediately, this isn't going to help you, but you're going to be able to request one of these and have it ready if you choose to do so. And Dr. Ball mentioned to me that the positivity rates, yes, they continue to go up, and they're not just going up slightly, they are skyrocketing again. Yesterday, the state reported its highest ever statewide positivity rating, jumping from 17.2% to 25.7%. Now, our previous high was 19%, and that was back in November of 2020. But some healthcare clinics and hospitals are seeing even higher numbers than that. On Monday, Primary Health told us that they were seeing positivity rates of 34% within their 21 clinics. Today, that number is nearing 50% positivity. And with the number of staff still out, they're temporarily closing 7 of their locations. Back on Monday at San Alfonso's health system, their positivity rate was 28.2%. And today, it's climbed up to 40.2%. And hospitalizations are slowly starting to rise back up. On December 24th, we had 225 people in the hospital with COVID, and as of Monday, that number was at 346, and that's without all hospitals reporting their data. And we just learned that all ICU beds at St. Luke's in the Magic Valley, they are full. So, are we headed back to implementing crisis standards of care?
We expect to be able to see increasing numbers of patients on an ongoing basis, and at some point will require movement back into crisis standards of care, most likely. Of course, God willing, we will get lucky and we'll see a peak and a plateau, but right now that's not predicted.
If you ask me to do an even over on it, I'd say the odds are more probable than not. And that's because of our learned experience so far. We know in every way there's been a spike of cases. 2 weeks later, hospitalizations. 2 weeks later, deaths.
And you can hear more from Doctors Nemerson and Souza coming up this Sunday morning on Viewpoint with Doug Petcash, 9 a.m. right here on KTVB. Okay, so what about the wastewater we just mentioned a minute ago? We've talked about this before, how city leaders and health officials, they often use our wastewater to test for COVID in the community. Basically, instead of relying on individual tests, the wastewater gives us a better idea of how and when to expect a spike in cases, and really when we can also expect a drop-off in cases. In cities like Boston and New York, they are seeing massive drop-offs in COVID in their wastewater right now. So, what's it looking like here in the city of Boise?
It was about a 400% spike from the previous sample, which is, I would almost say, unprecedented. And so what I'm thinking is that the trend line will likely increase, unfortunately, or at least maintain that upward trend. And maybe that first initial spike is the top of the trend, and maybe it's not. And we just don't know that until we get further down the line.
Those numbers, though, they are expected to be updated sometime this afternoon, so we'll get a little bit more insight on what that graph looks like. We'll update you when that's available. By the way, wastewater has also been used to figure out levels of polio, vaccination rates, opioid levels, and seasonal flu rates in our community. Very valuable information. It was one of the first bills to be introduced this legislative session, but with so many numbers and a complicated process, we figured we'd break it down a little bit further. So yes, we're talking taxes ahead. But first, the 208 text line is open, so get in your questions, your comments, your constructive criticisms, and yes, send us some jokes as well. Here's the number for you. It's right on your screen. 208-321-5614. Send us a message there, but make sure to include your name and hashtag the 208. We're going to read a few of these at the end of the show, so stick around. Idaho's record surplus of nearly $2 billion has Idaho lawmakers wasting little time figuring out what they want to do with it. Back on Wednesday, day 3 of the Idaho legislative session here to kick off the year, Idaho Republicans, they introduced a major tax bill, and they're touting it as a great give back to Idahoans. The Dems, however, argue that the proposed legislation would mostly and unfairly just give back to the state's wealthiest. The middle class, they say, would benefit more from a tax break. So, is this the one, or does this one need some more work? We're diving into the tax plan to take a look on what it does and does not accomplish. Idaho lawmakers hit the ground running this week, and already they have a major tax bill to debate. Idaho Republicans are touting this new legislation as a simple give back and tax cut for Idahoans as the state sits on millions and millions in budget surplus dollars.
We've got inflation going crazy across the nation and across the state. It's important to get this money back to the people.
House Majority Leader Republican Mike Moyle is one of the sponsors of the tax bill. He says the bill will consolidate Idaho's income tax brackets from 5 down to 4 with the new lower rates of 1%, 3%, 4.5%, and 6% respectively for each bracket. Now, the highest tax bracket will be for people who make $5,000 and more. The bill would also lower the corporate income tax from 6.5% to 6%, and it also provides a one-time income tax rebate of $350 million, returning approximately 12% of Idaho taxes paid in 2020, or $75 for each taxpayer independent, whatever amount is greater.
Most people in Idaho are in that upper bracket, so we're taking care of most Idahoans with that bill. But it is, some people don't pay any taxes. It makes it hard to give back money when they don't pay taxes. That's why the bill's written the way it is, though. We do give them $75 for every man, woman, and child if they don't pay taxes.
Representative Moyle says with the budget surplus, Republicans simply want to give Idahoans their tax dollars back.
Get it to their hands so they can use it to kind of offset some of the costs that are going up now.
Idaho Democrats say they appreciate the idea, but that this tax bill doesn't help those who need it most.
Now we have an opportunity to prioritize working Idahoans and bolstering the middle class, and this tax bill would squander that opportunity.
Assistant House Minority Leader, Democrat Laura Necochea says the cuts would direct the largest benefits to the top of the income spectrum.
Idaho Democrats would love to see us take those dollars that we have that are available and put them into property tax reduction, and would also want to have a conversation about repealing the sales tax on groceries.
Necochea adds that the tax brackets proposed don't really translate to everyone giving a fair share.
Yeah, there's no reason why a millionaire should pay the same percentage of their tax as a teacher, and we would absolutely support expanding those tax brackets to make those adjustments.
Every man, woman, and child is going to get something. It's a good bill, and it's going to lower our tax rates, makes us more competitive nationwide. It's going to help the state of Idaho look better to bring businesses here, and it's going to help people stay in their homes and jobs and work here and stay here for their lives. It's going to make it better for Idahoans, which is a good thing.
Idaho Democrats argue the surplus being used for this cut really isn't a surplus, but instead the result of bad policies and investments.
We underfund a lot of the things that local government has to do and that schools have to do. So if we put more of that state funding and directed it to schools and local governments, we could reduce property taxes substantially, and that's what Idahoans are asking for.
Moyle says it doesn't have to be one or the other.
There's enough to do a lot of things that need to be done and want to be done for a long time.
So we've seen a lot of questions about the Idaho tax table following this story. So let's take a look at it together, because if you haven't looked at it before, it is interesting. So to be clear, this is the current Idaho tax table, and we'll throw it up here on the big screen so everybody could follow along here. If the new legislation passes, this would change. But as it stands right now, you can see at the bottom of your screen, the highest tax bracket in the state of Idaho, and this is for individuals, it's individuals making more than $7,939. So anyone who has an income greater than that right now is in the highest tax bracket. So your current tax rate is 6.5%. I've heard from people this week that tell me, well, that sounds like a very low tax bracket. Is that correct? That's just how the state of Idaho does their tax bracket, and it does vary from state to state on income taxes. For example, in just to the west of us in Washington, there's no income tax. If you go south from here, you go to Colorado, they don't do tax brackets in Colorado. They actually have one flat tax rate, 4.5% that everybody pays. So the Idaho tax bracket here is interesting because it is broken up into these different columns. And over the years, we've heard from you and we've heard from the community about, well, this doesn't make sense. Why is the highest tax bracket, written this way? Well, this is just the way it's done in the state of Idaho. If the proposed legislation that we just talked about passed, That 5 brackets that you see there would actually be turned into 4, and that final bracket would be everybody who makes $5,000 and more. So if you made $5,001, if you made $1 million, you would be in that final tax bracket. And again, if this proposed legislation passes, that 6.5% tax would actually go down to just 6%. Now, if you've never looked at the Idaho tax table before, it's fully understandable that you weren't familiar with this, maybe if you hand it off to your CPA every April, but this is the Idaho current tax bracket. That big tax bracket is really what most people are in. Again, though, it does vary from state to state. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on that tax bill as we get closer to the end of the session, but of course, we'll be keeping a close eye on what income tax rates will be looking like. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the 208, the week that was, and we wanted to touch on another story that we aired earlier this week that got a lot of you talking and texting and sending in comments, and it was about what happened over this past weekend at the annual Governor's Dinner and Ball put on by the Idaho Republican Party. In attendance, really great group, former Governor Butch Otter, Governor Little, along with 3 of Idaho's congressional delegation, Senators Jim Risch and Mike Crapo, alongside Congressman Mike Simpson. And Simpson posted pictures along on his campaign social media accounts, but he also posted something else from the governor's dinner, a video of a speech that he gave, and this is where people got fired up. Take a listen.
We have a common goal, and that's to enact policies in our local communities, in our state, and at the federal level. And never forget our pride. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon. If you have ever heard this phrase, it does date back to a NASCAR race in Alabama last October. Despite what you've heard about this whole thing goes back to a NASCAR event. A driver, Brandon Brown, was being interviewed after winning a big race, and the crowd began chanting behind him as he was being interviewed. And it was a bit muffled and very loud in the stadium, but while the interview was going on, the reporter suggested that the crowd was saying, "Let's go, Brandon," since she was interviewing a man named Brandon. Well, as the conversation went on, however, it became very clear that the crowd in attendance, they were not saying, "Let's go, Brandon," but instead they were saying a four-letter word, Joe Biden. And since that day, "Let's go, Brandon" has become the cleaned-up slang version for the vulgar blah, 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 Joe Biden. Now, the video, it made a lot of traffic on social media, a lot of people commenting in media feeds online, several of whom expressed their dismay directly to the congressman on Twitter. But then suddenly, the video disappeared, and we reached out to the campaign on Monday before we aired this story, hoping to ask why the video was deleted and why the congressman felt the need to say, "Let's go, Brandon." We still have not heard back from Representative Simpson's campaign about his comments, and like we said, it's got a lot of you fired up at home, and we got a lot of responses, many of which we didn't have time to share on Monday. So we're going to talk about this right now and share the conversation. So from those who texted in, it was pretty divided on if these comments crossed the line, if they were fun, if they were stupid. Here's what people are saying. Mallory says, yes, people are too insensitive about "Let's go, Brandon." People are too sensitive about everything nowadays. Ben in Nampa says, come on, man, your liberal-leaning views are starting to show worse than ever. You're not going to find many who don't agree with "Let's go, Brandon." Kat says, meanwhile, wow, the vulgar immaturity of one of our leaders promoting "Let's go, Brandon" with all of it insinuates is beyond embarrassing for our state and all who want to mend the divide. And finally, Roy writes into us saying, quote, I am a middle school teacher in Idaho. Our kids are not allowed to say "Let's go, Brandon." Maybe our politicians should learn from our kids. And shortly after the segment aired on Monday night, Congressman Simpson did tweet from his campaign Twitter account. Here it goes. He says, quote, it has been brought to my attention that the video on this post is no longer available. My staff did not delete it, and we are making inquiries to determine what happened. The tweet includes the whole video, and it is still up for anyone to go watch. We'll be right back. Before we get to your comments, we asked you in the show yesterday to give us some suggestions on what the newly discovered potato-shaped planet should be called. And we got some good ones we want to share real quickly. Tom in Nampa says, wouldn't Mr. Potato Head be the obvious choice? I think that's a good one. Logan in Eagle says the potato planet should be named after the Potato King. Simplot, great answer. Chuck in Boise says, call the planet Space Spud, or how about Orida Spud? That's pretty good. And finally, I don't think Jim in Boise understood the assignment, but apparently we helped him complete his grocery list. So that is a big plus. Make sure to get those potatoes in there. Let's take a look at your comments real quickly. First one I think we have from Bill J. He makes the point that, the state decides to give back surplus revenue to Idahoans. It should go back to those who paid taxes, not to those who didn't contribute to the funding of our state. A good point there from Bill J. We know that there's some comments coming in like this from you this week. Colleen in Cuna says, whatever happened to Joey Pretzel? Misses reporting. I miss Joey Pretzel too. He took on a new career path over in Oregon. He's working in education. Still one of my best friends to this day. Hello, Joey. We miss you very much. I'll call you tonight. So those are the comments we had for you, but I want to show you a very special ending to our show here on a Feel Good Friday. This is a great piece of artwork that I wanted to share. This was created by Grace Battle. She's a 7th grade artist here in the Treasure Valley, and I just thought that her rendition here of showing the X-ray of a snowman inside of the operating room. I always wondered what the inside of the snowman looked like. This is some absolutely great art, and I can't wait to see what Grace Battle comes up with next. So if you have any art or any fun things to send us, you know our number. We'll be listening here. For now, though, we'll step aside. 208 returns on Monday.